Welcome back, everyone. This week's episode, we're discussing the top training mistakes that we see that's stalling people's progress. We're also going to discuss how you can avoid these training mistakes. I'm joined tonight with Coach Andy and Coach Jimmy. Guys, how are we doing tonight?
What's up, fellas?
Doing well. Thanks,
Excellent.
Ben.
So good. Nice. So let's go ahead and jump into the episode. This first one we're going to discuss, there's so many different rabbit holes that we can go down with it, whether that is from preparing sessions to how do we plan coming back from an injury, or if we hit a minor hiccup. And that is simply having a plan when it comes to our training. Prepping for this episode, I looked up the quote earlier because I knew the quote, but couldn't quite remember. And if I'm going to come on camera and try and say it, figured I might as well have it ready. Let's see if I don't mess it up here. But the quote from Winston Churchill is failing to prepare is preparing to fail. And I believe that is 100% accurate when it comes to our training if we are not preparing for the direction that we want to go. Guys, what do we think on this topic?
100% agree. And again, we all have so much going on in our lives, like balancing work, family, overall life stuff. The last thing you want to have to worry about is putting together your own training plan. And that's kind of how Modern Athlete came to be, is we're taking the guessing game out of it. Because I know myself, I've talked about this before. If I didn't have a training plan and I do this for a living, I might as well not even train, because I'm not going to just show up to the gym with no plan and just start exercising. So having a plan is the most important thing you can do. And it takes the guessing out of it, and you don't have to think. It's just you show up to the gym, you follow the app, you follow the program, execute, and then it's just one less thing and you just buy into it. So that's I 100% agree with that. So that's my thought.
You took the words out of my mouth. If you're showing up to the gym and you're just kind of just going on the fly and just trying to get a good sweat or whatever, chances are you probably have too much time on your hands in life. Because if you can afford just showing up and just wasting a couple hours, then you got time to also like plan it out. So, just like Jimmy said, job, family, children, responsibilities, side hustles, these things eat at our time. And, you know, personally, I don't know how anybody can just go into the gym and just get sweaty and just do that years on end. Unless you're just, you don't, that's all you aspire to. So yeah, you gotta have a plan. It's an essential. So.
And especially, how many times have we seen it? We've all seen it, been in public gyms or whatever. You see the same people every time, and year after year, people are not getting results. And you kind of feel for those people. Like, they're putting in work every single week, but what are they actually doing with their time? So if you're taking the time to be dedicated to go to the gym, you might as well take the time to follow a program and execute it. Because again, we talk about it, like there's a difference between exercising or working out and training. So if you're going to take the time to actually go to the gym and work out, follow a structured program, because your results will be that much better. Because I don't know about you guys, but I don't have a lot of time in my day to waste. I don't have any time. So I don't want to look back in a year or two from now and my body stays the same, my strength numbers stay the same. Well, there's a lot of people out there that are living that every day. So for those people out there that you're just going to the gym and you look the same and you're not getting the results you want, I suggest you follow a training plan, because again, we don't have that much time in life in general. So you might as well not waste it.
Yeah.
And,
And then a couple of things. Sorry, Andy, you go ahead.
Nope, you go ahead, Ben.
So kind of going back to talking about making the plan, and we look at, I know Jimmy, if you look at your day, your minute, like every minute is probably filled based off kind of text conversations we've had going on. There's a lot of people, their day's not like that. So I'd be interested on some of these individuals who say, oh, I don't have time to actually plan it out at 9 o'clock on Sunday morning, depending on what time zone you're in, when your iPhone shows you your screen time. How many of them are showing just a ridiculous amount of screen time there, wasted on social media, a random game on their phone, but doesn't have the time to actually plan out their training sessions? And then a lot of these, I know from my end, when it comes to planning it out, yeah, before the block, yeah, that takes some time. But once you have your structure set, it's really not that much of a time commitment. So like Once it's there, ready to go, it's simply just reminding yourself, or if you have the app, you're looking at it right then and there. I don't have my phone on me during the session, so it's before I'm looking exactly what I have right there, looking at my numbers that I have to hit. That saves you time. And I know Jimmy, me and you've talked about it on here before. I think it was on the episode we did on, avoiding mental burnout. It's much easier when you know exactly what you have to do and you're just following that.
And even on the other side of it, because I know we have a lot of coaches that follow us as well. For young coaches out there, if you're constantly switching up your structure and your template, and you're new to coaching, just understand you're going to get writer's block and you're not going to write good programs if you don't believe in a system to follow. So find a system that you truly believe in. And then it makes it that much easier. Then it's just plug and play as a strength coach. Like I truly buy into total body training. It just so happens to be the tier system. So I know the structure. Then from there, it's just taking the exercises and dumping them in, and it's plug and play based on what I'm trying to accomplish with the cycle. So not only for just the average person trying to find a program, but also for the coach as well. Like you don't want to be constantly switching up. Well, this phase I'm going to do conjugate for 4 weeks. And then next week I'm going to do whatever, a push pull leg split. And then next I'm going to do total body. Like find something you truly, truly believe in and buy into it and just go with it. So that's really important.
So I
Yeah,
was going to say
absolutely.
earlier that I was going to say earlier that in terms of the plan, just having a training program, that's like the bare minimum in my opinion. If you're one of these people who don't have a crazy busy life, yes, you should have a plan, but you should be also taking it to the next level and thinking each day you go into the gym having a specific purpose or thing you want to work on. For example, the other day I myself was doing 5 sets to 3 pretty heavy on squat, and I wanted to that day treat my sets as if I was doing one single and then one double, because sometimes when I go heavy, it's hard to think about doing 3 heavy reps right in a row. And it's even harder to think about doing that 5 times. But if I can split it up like that, it somehow makes it more manageable. And that was my plan. And I just wanted to execute to see if I got higher quality movement and if I had as much stress going through. Um, you can ad infinitum from there, but having the workout plan, that's just the bare minimum. And then when you walk into the gym, you should be fine tuning about how to properly execute each and every part of that.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, Andy, just to go off that, we had discussed previously one of the things that stalls progress and when it comes into planning is we had wrote it down as greedy gains as opposed to modest bumps. Could you go a little bit further into that when it comes to, because you talking about the triples and how you're thinking about those sets? Uh, I think it's a good way for us to lead into that next topic there. Still under not having a plan, but yeah.
Yeah. So, greedy gains, basically, I'm referring to if you switch to a new program or if you're trying to do something new, switching from like strength to, cardio based work, or if even if you're just new to training, you are going to experience a pretty significant climb. They're called newbie gains, is the technical term for them. And those newbie games go away quickly. And sometimes you'll get those newbie games, you'll start to flatten out in your progress. You walk away from training for a little bit and then you come back. And when you come back, you expect to have those same newbie gains. And you may for about 3 weeks. All right. And then you just can't keep on adding 5 or 10 pounds to the bar every single workout. You need to have something more modest in mind. And you need to think about, just because you can put it on the bar and do it, it doesn't mean that you ought to be doing it. You don't need to be training maximally every time, because when you train maximally, say instead of putting on 10 pounds on my bench press every month, I could actually put on 20. Cool. Maybe you can do 20, but by training maximally, you're going to speed up the process to burnout, and then you're going to end up further behind in the long run. So modest bumps, I'm just basically referring to the fact of, you know, the tortoise always beats the hare. 5 pounds every week is going to beat the person who tries to bump 20 pounds every week, every single time. Jimmy, your thoughts?
Yeah, no, I 100% agree. And a lot of people new to training, like, don't use 2.5 pound plates. But once you've been training for over a decade and you're scratching and clawing every single phase and every single week to add a little bit to the bar, 2.5 pounds on each side matters. That's why they make 2.5 pound plates. So I want to make a push where 2.5 pound plates are utilized more often. So, like, for example, if I'm doing, let's say it's not a percentage based program, it doesn't really matter if it's percentage or not. But if I do a warm up set at 135, let's say week one, well, the following week, I'm going to try to at least just add 2.5 pounds to each side. And that warm up set goes from 135 to then 140. And then I do that every single set. And you add that up. So if it's over a set of five. So we have 5 pounds times 5 reps. That's 25 extra pounds you're lifting that week. Then you add, or that session, and then you add that up over weeks, months, and years. That will start to stack up over time. Trying to cheat the system and jump 10 pounds. The amount of times I see people like over jump their numbers, they fail on a rep. I think Louis Simmons, we used to say all the time, like, you shouldn't fail because then that's teaching your body to fail. So you should always be completing reps. I was guilty of this when I was in high school. Like, everybody, every day is bench day, and you end up getting stuffed on 225 when you're 17, 18 years old or whatever. And you just think magically you're going to hit that number. Like, strength is built on good quality repetitions over and over again. And that's where just making, to Andy's point, like making small incremental jumps will pay dividends in the end. You can't cheat the system. So,
Yeah, I really like
I'm
what
going
you
to
said there
piggyback
with
off
the
of
two and
that.
a half pounds. It kind of, you guys have probably seen that question before. People ask, would you rather have $1 million today or a penny doubled every day for the next 30 days? And then everyone thinks like, oh, hell yeah, let
Right.
me get $1 million today. And then when you start doubling that penny each day 30 is just some astronomical number. So it's just that small,
Mhm.
consistent progress with it throughout. And turn it back over to you, Andy.
Yeah, I was gonna say, so just to use the bench press, like if you can only bench press 45 on each side, everybody dreams of like doing 2 plates. And if you can do 2 plates, you dream of doing three. Well, it's very common for the people we work with to only be able to bench, say, 195 when they start working with us. Now, they may want to put on 10 pounds a week on their bench, and maybe they can for the first couple weeks. But imagine if I just said, like, look, we're going to put 5 pounds on once a month. Once a month, that's like nothing. Well, over the course of 3 months, it's nothing. But over the course of a year, it's 60 pounds. Over the course of 2 years, it's 120 pounds. And if you just do what I'm telling you now, when you're at 195 in 2 years, you'll be benching 3 plates, right? How many times we talk to people who could bench 195 and they have a goal of benching 2 plates and they never get there just because they get too greedy at the beginning. If you just slow and steady and use that idea of compound interest, like Ben is talking about, that's where the money's at.
yeah, 100%. And you can't miss sessions. Like, that is a non negotiable. Like, obviously life things will come up, but too many times people will fall in a rut and miss a month of training. Then they'll be consistent for 12 weeks. Then they'll miss another couple weeks, and they're always missing the same session. That can't happen. If you truly live it and crave it and you want something that bad, you have to find a way to do it. Whether it's you're super busy and sometimes you got to train at 4 o'clock in the morning, or sometimes it's after your kids go to bed and it's got to be at 9:30, 10 o'clock at night. It just has to happen. If you want it bad enough, you'll figure it out. But that's how you get results, is just day in and day out, executing quality reps over time. And it just, you got to get it done. It's just, that's no other way to look at it. So,
Yeah, absolutely. If it matters to you, you're going to figure out how to get it done, right? And
and
then so,
real quick, Ben, one of the last thing I just want to hammer home is like, also with making those aggressive jumps, yeah, like to Andy's point, it'll work early on, but that's a short ride. It will probably end in at best case scenario is just stalling, and then worst case scenario is getting injured. Most of the people that train with us are not like younger, like 17, 18 years old. So most of like a little bit older. If you want to continuously get under a barbell and do what you enjoy doing, you got to do it the right way, or you're going to be mid to late 30s, not being able to squat, bench, or deadlift because you just have nagging injuries because you got over aggressive in your 20s. So if you want to do this until you're in the dirt, you got to do a small jumps and just execute over and over again.
Yeah, and Jimmy, that's a perfect segue into our last topic we had under not having a plan, and that's people trying to push through injuries and not understand the difference between an injury and discomfort. So, end of the day, we have to listen to our bodies. The whole like, oh, no pain, no gain is such a bad expression, and especially when it's used in the wrong way. Um, but no, yeah. So if you're injured, listen to your body. Don't sit there and think like, oh, I have to grind it out because that's what I saw David Goggins do online as he's running with whatever injury and just continuing to go. You are not him. Most people are not him, right? So listen to your body, listen to what it's telling you, because if we continue to just try and grind through some of these injuries, then it's going to be those long term, lasting, nagging injuries that really makes training some of these movements incredibly difficult for us. There's definitely a difference between pain and discomfort when it comes to training.
Yeah. And I see both sides of it. I see in a culture of just finding the easy way out with everything being comfortable. We've talked about this previously. There's a fine line between just going too easy, and then there's a very fine line of going too hard. Trust me, I've made the mistake of going too hard and pushing through certain things, and I've gotten injured. So I'm in a great position because I've made those mistakes. So I'm trying to educate people, don't make the same mistakes that I've made. I've torn things off bones, broken bones, the whole bit, all when it comes to training. But that's given me like good education to help others to not make the same mistakes I have. Because again, to what we were
I've
talking about,
witnessed it firsthand. Just FYI.
correct. Andy's witnessed it
Sorry.
firsthand. Like, yes, no, absolutely. Tearing things off bones, the whole bit. But again, it's a very fine line of like being too soft and like avoiding every discomfort, and then being a hardo and just not listening to your body because oh I'm sore and I have this nagging injury. I'm just going to push through, and then boom, you miss 6 to 9 months of training of whatever body part that you injure. So it's definitely a fine line, and you got to learn that. But yeah, you just got to be really smart. So Andy, I'd like to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing of the dichotomy. For anybody out there who's listening, and you know deep down in your heart of hearts that you're just soft, like you need to learn how to push. I think the majority of our audience is probably the other side. And if you're one of these people who is doing the same thing over and over, not making gains, you might also be the person who is doing the same thing over and over, pushing through injury and always going one step forward, two steps back. So, what I tell people is, if it is, you need to learn the difference between discomfort and pain. Discomfort is just kind of like general muscle soreness and things like that. Pain is more, it's something sharp. It's not dull. You can pinpoint it. It hurts right here, not it hurts around here. The other thing is if you hear something snap, crackle, or pop, stop doing it immediately. Okay, in the weight room. Um, if you feel like you are possibly injuring yourself in the weight room, step one is cut the weight in half and see if it bothers you. If it doesn't bother you, start working back up until around the point where it does, and then back it off a little bit.
Any pain or any sharp pains, things like that, think of it as like a check engine light being on. There's a reason why that light's on. So you may have to get under the hood, whether it's with an athletic trainer, a physical therapist, somebody to just kind of basically look under the hood like a mechanic would to tell you what's actually wrong. Is it something that we can continue training or like as tolerated, or do we have to shut things down for a couple weeks and let that thing heal? Because sometimes that check engine light, that's right, it goes on right before something ruptures, whether it's a car or whether it's your body. So I have learned that the hard way. I've had my check engine light on and I'm trying to take this truck that's a couple 100,000 miles and I blow an adductor off the bone. So you definitely, when you have that pain, think of it as a check engine light being on, and you got to address it. So, but again, understanding the difference between like little discomfort, pain, and injury. So,
Yeah. And that, I love that check engine light analogy. Is how many times I know in my training career I've had my left hamstrings kind of nagging me. It hasn't gotten so bad, but I will definitely feel it tighten up as my body kind of warning me to, hey, maybe throttle it back. Maybe we're going to give some more love to these hamstrings to make sure we're doing the right things. Maybe not going to do a sprint session right now is not what I need to do, but I do need to address this right now.
yeah.
And I think one of the big things too is if you have, we talked about pain and discomfort. Pain doesn't mean you stop lifting. Like there are ways that we can modify training around that pain. We just have to do it appropriately. Where I think is such a big issue is when we have that pain, we ignore the pain, and then we just try and do what is ever on the sheet because you think like, oh, this is what I have to do. So
Yeah.
we can definitely find those modifications to train appropriately.
Yeah. And depending,
So
obviously, we're speaking in generalities because we're not talking about a specific injury. But depending on the injury, there's usually a way to work around something. So if you have an injury to one leg, you could train upper body back supported, meaning like seated on a bench, do some upper body work. If you have an upper body injury, let's say it's a wrist injury, you could probably, as long I'm not a doctor here, so follow your doctor's orders if you have this issue. But safety bar squat is a great tool because you can load the bar, not have to worry about really holding onto it much. If you have an upper body extremity, the answer, if you're cleared to do so and do activity, activity is always going to be the answer as long as it's within reason, obviously. So
yeah, I would say if you're somebody listening to these episodes and you follow our stuff, if you have somebody who tells you to just stop doing something in general, or hey, you're never going to be able to do this again, you should probably find another physical therapist, another doctor to go see. I'm a big, I don't believe that you just stopping and at 26 years old being told you can never run again and just being okay with that. I would suggest going to find somebody else to see.
especially like as strength coaches, we've dealt with hundreds of thousands of individuals like that have had something that we've had to work around. So as strength coaches, we're problem solvers when it comes to the body. So you guys give us a problem, we'll figure out a way to work around that problem because not only for the body physically, but mentally, we all know that majority of the reason why a lot of us train is for the stress release, mental health, all those things. So if you were to take that away from somebody, that's going to be a problem. So there's a workaround, and that's the nice part about Train Heroic is having for our teams the ability to communicate with the coaches. So the amount of times that I've had people reach out like, hey, I have this nagging injury. Is there a way to work around it? Again, I'm always going to go to doctor's orders first. But if they're cleared to do activity, but they just don't know what exercise to pick, that's the nice part about having a strength coach because we've had to do that for decades. So we can work around things.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so let's go ahead and move on to our next bullet on here. And we touched on it a little bit in our first topic, but the next one we talk that we see stall progress is simply accountability. We mentioned earlier missing sessions, and that's going to be such a big one because you can't ever truly track your progress if you're not doing the program how it is intended to be executed. So if I'm picking and choosing days that I want to do as opposed to days that I need to do, or simply doing all the days that are in the program, like I'm never going to be able to actually see that progress. We referenced it earlier about how many people do you see that have been exercising their whole life and then have never truly made progress. I would argue that a lot of them have never truly stuck to a consistent program. I think there also is the other side of one of the things that's always been so interesting interesting to me about exercise in general is just how many people do it, but how many people like just don't have the knowledge. And what's awesome today is how many more people are able to have access to that knowledge. But I think a big part of that comes from simply just not stacking days on top of each other, weeks on top of each other, months on top of each other. And then I know we kind of hit on that earlier. Is there anything you two want to add to that one?
Yeah,
No, I think that hits the nail on the head.
I was gonna say,
Go for it, Andy.
Or
yeah, there's the
and
person who goes in and constantly is just uh program hopping or doesn't go with the plan, exercising, not seeing any gains. But there's also that person who has done the same thing year in and year out, done the exact same program, and is religious. They never miss a session. And usually that person is above average. You know, they're not hitting their potential, but they're a heck of a lot better than their peers. I'm thinking of a guy, he works in the tactical space, and this dude is just old school. He's like over 40 years old. He just loves to do dumbbell bench pressing and curls. And, occasionally he'll pick up a deadlift and he'll get on the elliptical. But that guy passes and excels at his PT test every time just because he's done that same thing year in and year out. So he's not hitting his potential, but it just goes to show that consistency itself is, it's the trump card to everything. I like to tell people that the magic is in the consistency. So anyway, I just had to get that point out.
Yeah, I'm gonna piggyback off that because that team lunch pail, we echo that, and I echo it to the team as well, and then they'll say it back to me. But my favorite line is consistency is undefeated, and that's 100% true. Like I know for myself, I'm going to do some variation of a squat, some variation of a press, a pull, and some variation of a deadlift until I take my last breath. As long as God willing, I'm able to keep getting under a bar and keep training. That's just going to be what's in the program until I'm no longer here. And that's how it's going to be. And I'm going to execute it every single week because I owe it to myself. I owe it to my family. That's just part of what I believe in. And that's what I'm going to do. But it doesn't always have to be a magic program. It just has to be the simple things like we've talked about before. Simple works, and consistency is always
And
undefeated.
going off of that point, Jimmy, some people may hear that and they'll think, wow, that feels really monotonous and restraining, that I'm just going to be doing this, same thing year in, year out. But in fact, it's the opposite. By understanding that these basic movement patterns are the non-negotiable and that you're going to do them to the day you die, that frees you up to not have to worry about that stuff anymore. Now you can focus on other things as it relates to your training and physical development, sleep, nutrition, rep schemes, whatever. But there's something to be said of just knowing in advance, these are the non-negotiables that are going to happen from now until they put dirt on my coffin. And um, I encourage everybody to give it a try. So
yeah, and then Andy, when you were giving your description of that individual earlier, it makes me think of whoever's been to a commercial gym has probably seen that 70-year-old individual who's there at 5 a.m. every morning drinking the blackest coffee he possibly can, who does the exact same thing every single day. But I would argue that he is doing much better than
right.
most people his age. Is it a would anyone say, hey, this is a great training program? Probably not. But again, it goes back to the consistency, and that individual is moving better than most
Yep.
individuals their age. And that individual, when you go talk to them in the gym, they'll have some crazy
Yep.
stories to tell you.
Yep. That's a great example. That's a great example.
And I'll take the guy who's consistent on maybe not the most scientifically backed advanced program versus the guy who has the best program but cherry picks the exercises and the weeks that he wants to do. I'm going to take the old school guy that executes the same thing week in and week out versus the guy with the flashiest gear, the flashiest shoes, the flashiest belt and all this stuff, but he can't stay consistent. I'm putting my money on the guy
Yep.
who's consistent.
Now,
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's kind of like
I was going to
go
say,
ahead, Andy.
at this point, some of our listeners may be familiar with Louis Simmons. the legendary strength coach, and a big part of his strength system was what's called avoiding the law of accommodation. If you have the same stimulus, you progress will not only slow and stall, but eventually you go backwards. So you need to add variation and add different movements in order to keep progress going forward. So that might be the rebuttal to what we're saying right now. But that's not what we're talking about. What we're talking about is a basic like movement patterns that are non-negotiable. And then you within those movement patterns, you can add variety to rep schemes, to tempo of the reps, to the intensity, to the type of bar it is, and so on and so forth. So it's not like we're just doing this exact same uh, exercise every Monday, Wednesday, Friday till we're gray. There's plenty of variety and there's plenty of room to grow and vary within the constraints that we're talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, so moving on to our next topic that we have tonight, one of the biggest things we see stalling progress is simply just poor recovery. And this first one we're going to talk about under poor recovery is fueling. So if we're not fueling correctly, we can't ever expect to get the most out of our training sessions and to truly make the progress because we're not giving our body what it needs for one to be the best we can be in those sessions, and then two, for those muscles to recover in the training after the training sessions. I don't know if you guys saw it, but Netflix just released a documentary on, remember that reality TV show, The Biggest Loser? So they just released a documentary on that, and some of these individuals are talking about these crazy diets that they were having these guys do back then. And it's honestly, knowing what we know now, I'm sure back in the day I liked the show and whatever else. I was like, they just need to work hard or whatever else. It was kind of it was kind of sad to truly watch what they were putting these individuals through. They had individuals who were 280 pounds on a 600 calorie diet and then exercising for 7 hours a day. Like it was cringy to watch as a professional strength coach today because we know that like you are just setting that guy up for failure. Yeah, they're going to lose a bunch of weight, but they're not making themselves healthier.
Yeah, I'm going to go off on a little bit here. So, Andy and I, not that we disagree on this next topic about fueling and recovery, I think Andy does an incredible job as far as this goes. Trust me, I know all the things that need to be done correctly. But the average person out there, we don't live in this perfect bubble where because I feel like everything on social media is got to be, you got to eat perfect. You got to have all your protein. I understand all that. You got to get your 8 hours of sleep, all these things. And that's all that's pushed out there. But for the average American, that's just not realistic. With everything going on in their lives, like don't drink alcohol, don't have sweets, all these things. Yeah, do I think you should be doing all this in excess? Absolutely not, especially if your end goal is performance and your body and things like that. But let's be real. I can tell you, I still have drinks with my wife. I still eat sweets with my kids. I'm not going to hold back. But guess what? When I can have those controllables dialed in, I'm going to do that. But I'm I feel like I can relate to the majority of people out there because I'm not perfect. All right. The only thing that I do every single week is I train, and some days it's on 4 hours of sleep. Some days it's on 8 hours of sleep. Some days I get all my protein intake. Some days I don't. But we're playing the long game and just go out there and do it and just show up. So I just feel like too much stuff on social media is like, you got to do everything perfect, and that's how you're going to get your six-pack abs. No, just life's going to happen. Enjoy life. Like if this hourglass is running out on all of us, go live, but still make the majority of what you're doing healthy and be smart about it. So I'll
I kind of
pause
like
there.
that. So
Yeah, like they
um,
say the 80-20 rule.
yeah, the 80-20 rule. And here's the thing, right? Is on the one hand, we're telling people not to be soft, to be consistent and all that. And on the other hand, we're saying, you have to understand the reality that it's impossible to bat 1,000. And for the person who has trouble with self-discipline, self-mastery, whatever, that's now a green light to just go hog, right? And for the person who is super regimented and type A and OCD about things, what Jimmy said may sound a little scary. right? That you can actually deviate a little bit from your plan and still get results, whatever. I would say that at this point, it's really easy to get your mind tied up in knots. And it is essential that you have somebody that you can bounce these ideas off of. Okay. So a training partner would be ideal, but the reality is that training partners are hard to come by unless you're like on some sort of like a team sport. um, a coach would be an even better one. Like, not the shameless plug for Modern Athlete, but just having like one of us where you can just shoot a text. Hey, man, I really feel like having a pizza. It's my daughter's birthday, but I know I got this body comp goal. What do you think? You know what I mean? And that person will have a relationship because they'll understand the entire context of what's going on in your life in terms of relationship stress, your performance, your training, your other obligations that you have, and they'll be able to tell you in those moments, yeah, have the pizza, or nah, dog, stick with the plan. And I think sometimes we have all these little micro decisions that Jimmy is talking about, and you can get decision fatigue. And again, you can tie yourself up in knots. And one of the essential things to continue to make progress is having another competent person who knows you, who knows the plan, and who can talk you in and out of ideas. So that's it. Rant over.
No, yeah, absolutely. If you're at your daughter's birthday party and you're scared to have a piece of pizza, like that's not a good way to live, is it? So, and then last one we have within this topic is simply sleep. We're not going to go too far into this one. If you guys are interested in hearing more on sleep, we do have an episode that is full on with recovery from sleep and nutrition, and along with a couple other things. But if you can, we want to prioritize sleep. And like Jimmy said, it's not going to be perfect. If you have things going on, it's not a ideal situation for everyone to get 8 hours every single night, but get the sleep when you can. Take advantage of it when you can, because truly that is how our body is going to recover along with that nutrition. Real quick, guys, is there anything you wanted to add on that one?
No, just again, everybody knows what to do. Go out and do it. But for that once in a while occurrence, like where, oh, I got this couple hundred or a couple $1,000 bed that's like perfectly climate controlled and perfect cushioning. I've heard of these crazy things now. Like one side of the bed can be a certain foam, like whatever foam, and then the other side's a little bit stiffer. Like, yeah, that's great. But then I'm going to also fall asleep with my kids in twisted angles. My daughter's kicking me in the ribs, and then I got to go train the next day. And it's just going to happen. I'm not going to be like, oh, I'm not going to sleep with my kids or accidentally fall asleep with them. Like, no, I'm still going to go out and do it. And that's how everybody should be. So again, if it's every single day that you're digging yourself in a hole, whether it's nutrition, whether it's sleep, that's not what we're looking for. But to Andy's point, like, yes, this can get confusing and tie yourself in knots, but just make sure there's more good days than bad days. Have more good
So,
days than more bad days.
Jimmy, from my understanding, you're not sleeping in an altitude tent at night.
Do you
No,
have
I
a
don't have
do
the
you or do you
pockets for
not
that.
have a chili pad? Okay.
I do not have a chili pad. Most of the time, if I'm reading my kids a story, I'm falling asleep on like a
Yeah.
Bluey doll or something, and one of my kids is like kicking me in the rib cage or something. So not ideal
Yeah.
for REM sleep, I can
Okay.
tell you that, but
So
it is what it is.
okay. So just a quick touch on this point from another perspective. The things that we're talking about in terms of like having a plan for your training, a lot of part when it comes to fueling your body, a lot of it just comes down to planning. You end up putting bad stuff in your mouth, or you end up putting it in your mouth at the wrong time, or not at all, because you simply haven't thought out the plan and executed it. Sleep is one of those things that's arguably going to be more important for your recovery than even fueling is, and it's one of the easiest things to improve on. So maybe, like Jimmy said, maybe you can't get 8 hours a night. Like, it's impossible, right? But maybe you're not doing anything other than just talking about the fact that you need to get better sleep. You can simply get a watch that tracks your sleep, or an Oura ring that tracks your sleep, and that alone is going to help you out. For instance, 5 or 6 years ago, there was a study that came out that showed that athletes who wore a sleep wearing device that tracked your sleep over the course of the next 3 months slept 42 more minutes per night. They didn't do anything else. They just started tracking it. And that's something really easy you can do. Just start wearing it, just start getting an awareness of where you are. Maybe again, maybe you're falling asleep with the kids in the hallway with the little bluey thing. I don't know what that thing is, Jimmy, but whatever. uh, but maybe you can at least do something like knock out the blue light for 2 hours before you go to bed, or learn to take melatonin or whatever. There's always some little thing that you can do to improve on your sleep that is doable. So I encourage everybody to do that.
Yeah, and I 100%, I think that's a great point from a preparation standpoint, because if you don't prepare your meals the night before, you're more likely to eat out and not eat healthy, and that's going to throw you off track. So 100% preparation is key, whether it's meal prepping, whether it's your training plan, whether it's putting your training gear out the night before, or it's your sleep. So preparation is huge. So, but again, you're going to run into bumps in the road where you just fell asleep early and you just forgot to prep your meal for lunch the next day, and you got to just suck it up, just making sure you have more good days than bad days.
One more thought, man. Sorry, one more thought.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
Yep.
a lot of times when they in with diets now, with people trying to lose weight, they'll use tools from cognitive behavioral therapy, and what they'll talk about is having a plan of how you're going to respond when you fail, because you will fail. And that carries over beyond just diet and food choices into your training and recovery and all those things we're talking about. Is if you're a perfectionist, you better figure out really fast how you're going to respond when you don't measure up to your own standard, because it's going to happen. And it's a lot of times the pit people fall into is they mess up, they get down on themselves, they mess up twice, they get down on themselves, and then they just say screw it. They just throw everything out the window, and now they're not sleeping. They're just playing video games, watching McDonald's, and smoking weed or whatever. So don't, have a plan for when you fail, because it's going to happen, and it's just going to be a speed bump in the road that you're going to have to learn to get over.
No, yeah, and that's an excellent point. Jimmy, do you have something you wanted to add to that?
No, great
Or-
point. Great point.
it's no, it really is a great point. And then, so the last topic we have tonight, Andy, I'm actually going to throw this one directly over to you. As we discussed it earlier, and this one is, we're going to say it at first, but hang in there with us on what we mean by it, because I think there's a good and a bad to this topic right here, and that is simply comparing yourself to others. And before I take any of what you want to say, Andy, I'm going to go ahead and throw it your way.
Yeah. So comparing yourself to others, if you are on a playing on a team sport, or you're in a tactical setting when you're on a team, police, fire, whatever, if you're in the military, you de facto have to compare yourself to somebody else, because you're in a competitive environment. But what what we really want to focus on is, you don't want to obsess over what other people are doing and use that as your measuring stick for how you are doing. What you want to do is just pay attention to where you are at that point, and try to get a little bit better based upon where you are. For instance, say that you're in a tactical setting and your PT test requires you to run a 3 mile. Okay. And say that you're in some sort of elite squad, and everybody in your unit is running a 3 mile in under 20 minutes, and you're at 26. Okay. There's no sense beating yourself up that you can't run a 20, because now you're comparing yourself to a standard that you shouldn't. However, it's perfectly okay to remind yourself that, hey, last month I ran at 27. This month I ran at 26. At this rate, I'll be up at the same level as everybody else is in 6 months. I just need to take care of this next month coming up. So that's what we mean by comparing yourself to others. You're gonna you're going to get good at something, and when you dedicate yourself to it, And what's going to happen is you're inevitably always going to find somebody who's better at it than you are. Okay. It's just the nature of the beast. Even if you go to the highest level and you win a world record, sooner or later somebody's going to bust that world record. And comparing yourself to others is a really good way to get a defeatist attitude. Jimmy, what are your thoughts?
No, I think you covered all the bases there. 100% agree. I got nothing to add to that.
And then, Andy, the one thing I do want to add to it is when we look at comparing ourselves to others, I think that's a very good way to get injured. So if I like you gave the times for the 3 mile, if I'm trying to get better at running and I'm comparing myself to an individual who's been doing endurance events for years and years and years, he's running 50 miles per week. Maybe I'm running 10 miles, and this goes back to something we've touched on so much. I can't compare his training to my training because
Yeah.
we're at two different levels. So for me to try to compare myself to him, and I just try to jump up to 50 miles a week, then I'm going to get injured. And then we've said before, if I get injured, now I've regressed from my overall training goal. I think it's good to compare yourself to others as far as a standard, like you talked about in your jobs, or if you're somebody who wants to complete SFAS, go get Ranger tab. Like, yes, it is good to compare yourself to that standard that you want to be at, but you have to run your own race getting to there.
I experienced this when I was a college football strength and conditioning coach. I can remember we did some testing of our athletes, and I can't remember the coach. Let's just say he is a defensive line coach, and he was saying, "Wow, so and so really has made good progress." But wait, compared to the rest of the D line, he stinks. On the other hand, he's better compared to the offensive linemen, and they're all linemen, so there's that. Wait a second. Compared to NFL guys, he stinks. And this coach could not understand. It was like throwing Velcro balls at a slick wall. It's like, dude, find something to compare this guy to and just stick with that. But you can't keep on bouncing around these other comparisons. I feel like sometimes people do that to themselves, where 1 minute they're a champ and they feel great about themselves. The very next minute they're comparing themselves to Usain Bolt and they feel like trash. So, yeah, just figure out what you need to compare yourself to, namely yourself, and stick with that.
Yeah, I bet that's fun for that guy, just thinking of every single comparison
And
that he can.
within the
Jimmy,
span of
was
like
there something
30
you want to add to
seconds,
that?
within the span of 30 seconds, it's like,
Oh
I'm like,
yeah,
do
that's
you
tough.
make over $100,000 a year? This is a joke.
That's awesome.
I
Now,
was probably making a lot more than that. You said he was
Yeah,
the
no,
D line coach. Yeah, so
he was
some of them are
making more like
making
a half a
two, three
million or
hundred.
something or whatever. But I'm just like, I can't believe somebody like you
Yeah,
makes that much money. Like, what am I doing in my life? See, that's what I'm doing.
that's
Now I'm
awesome.
comparing
Um,
myself to him. Right? I shouldn't be comparing myself to him. Anyway,
yeah.
shouldn't be doing that. Um, but yeah, like I think I try to say that to my kids. I try to just preach that all the time. Like so and so has this. Well, just compare yourself to who you were the last training cycle, the last 6 months, a year ago. Like compare yourself to that person and you'll get somewhere. Because if you keep looking to Andy's point, there's always going to be somebody that's better at something. Bigger, stronger, faster, better looking, all those things are going to be on the table. So just compare yourself to who you were yesterday, last training cycle, last squat max, all those things, and just keep your head down and go. So that's all I got.
Absolutely. Well, that's our episode this week. Make sure to drop in the comments any questions you'd like us to answer on anything we discussed tonight in this episode. And if you're interested in training with us, whether that's on one of our training teams or one on one, make sure to check out the links in our descriptions. We'll see you guys back here next week.
Awesome.
thank
Thanks,
you, Ben.
fellas.